I used to believe that hard work and good intentions could balance everything, that life rewarded effort, that fairness was real if you fought for it. But that was before I learned how quietly double standards can destroy a person. Not all at once, but slowly, piece by piece, until you no longer recognize yourself. My name is Alina, and this is the story of how I learned that being right doesn't always mean you'll be believed. It started at work. I'd been at the company for 6 years, long enough to know every crack in the system, every unwritten rule. I was the reliable one, the one they called when projects fell apart, when others quit, when deadlines burned like fires no one else wanted to put out. I didn't mind. I told myself it would pay off eventually. The overtime, the sacrifices, the missed weekends. And maybe it would have, if I had been someone else. Someone not me. When our department head retired, the promotion everyone expected me to get was suddenly offered to Ethan. Ethan, who had been there barely a year. Ethan, who left early for golf meetings and called female coworkers sweetie in staff emails. Ethan, who once asked me to proofread a presentation because he said I had a secretary's touch. When I asked our new director why I hadn't even been considered, she said, Ethan just had stronger leadership energy. I remember nodding, pretending not to understand what that really meant. Leadership energy was code for confidence. And confidence, apparently, was something men were allowed to fake until they made it. When women tried, it was called arrogance. I thought I could shake it off. I threw myself back into work, determined to prove my worth. But it was like fighting gravity. Invisible, constant, impossible to win against. Ethan started taking credit for things I'd done. He'd stand in meetings, repeating my words from the week before like they were his ideas, and people would nod, impressed. Once I confronted him privately. I told him to stop. He smiled, that infuriating half-smile men use when they think you're being emotional, and said we were all part of the same team. That night, I went home angry enough to cry, but anger has a way of turning into something sharper. I began documenting everything. Emails, reports, timestamps, witnesses. Every time he dismissed my work. Every instance of bias I could catch in writing. I didn't plan revenge. I just wanted truth. Until the Christmas party. It was supposed to be harmless. Drinks, music, fake cheer. Ethan was drunk enough to stop pretending. He cornered me near the bar and told me I was beautiful when I wasn't trying so hard to be smarter than everyone else. People saw. No one said a word. The next day, I filed a formal complaint. HR called it serious and promised confidentiality. By Monday, the whispers had started. Someone said I'd flirted with him first. Someone else said I was jealous of his promotion. My inbox filled with silence. Meetings were held without me. Colleagues I'd mentored for years suddenly avoided eye contact. By Friday, I was placed on administrative leave. They said it was standard procedure while they investigated. Ethan stayed at work. A month later, I received an email that said there was insufficient evidence to support my claims. But they appreciated my honesty and professionalism. I stared at that message for a long time. Honesty and professionalism, the last words people use when they're erasing you politely. That should have been the end of it, but stories like mine don't end cleanly. 6 weeks later, I learned Ethan had been promoted again. My old boss's position this time. The same people who called my behavior disruptive now called his ambition inspiring. I deleted my company email account that day. It wasn't just my career that cracked. It was something deeper. My sense of fairness. My ability to trust authority. My belief that if you played by the rules, you'd be protected by them. The truth was simpler. The rules weren't written for people like me. When a man is assertive, he's strong. When a woman is assertive, she's difficult. When he's ambitious, he's driven. When she's ambitious, she's threatening. And when he crosses the line, it's a misunderstanding. When she points it out, it's drama. It took me a year to recover, to find another job, another version of myself that could still function without bitterness. But even now, the scar is there. Every time I hear the word professional, I flinch. I work for a smaller firm now, one that values collaboration more than ego. It's not perfect, but it's real. My boss is a woman who knows what it feels like to be told she's too much. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed silent, if I had just played along, smiled through the insults, laughed at the right jokes. Maybe I'd still have that job, that title, that so-called respect. But I'd also still be living under someone else's definition of worth. And that's what double standards do. They don't just take away opportunities, they make you question whether you deserve them in the first place. So yes, it shattered my life for a while. It broke things I thought were unbreakable. But it also revealed what was real. The strength that comes after humiliation, the quiet power of starting again, and the courage to never let anyone rewrite your story for you. Because the truth about double standards is that they only win when you stop fighting them. And I'm done being polite about surviving. When you lose everything, silence becomes a strange kind of company. For months after I left the firm, I avoided mirrors, avoided people, avoided anything that reminded me of who I used to be. I told everyone I was fine, but fine is just another word for broken with better posture. I found work at a small marketing agency run by two sisters who built the company from nothing. They were tough, outspoken, and allergic to excuses. The pay wasn't great, but for the first time in years, I could breathe. There were no corner offices, no ego-driven meetings, no people pretending to be allies while sharpening knives behind their backs. Just work. Honest, messy, creative work. At first, I kept my head down. I didn't talk about my past. I was tired of being the woman who complained, tired of the label that had followed me out of my last job. Difficult. But one afternoon, during a brainstorming session, one of the junior designers, a quiet, brilliant girl named Lily, stayed behind after everyone else left. She asked if she could tell me something, and I said yes. Her voice shook as she told me about a client who had been making inappropriate comments for weeks. She didn't want to report it because she needed the job. As she spoke, I felt something shift inside me, a spark I thought had died. I told her what no one told me when it mattered, that she wasn't crazy and she wasn't overreacting. That silence only protects the wrong people. Together, we reported him. The sisters handled it swiftly. The client was dropped. No hesitation, no cover-ups. That day, I realized something important. The system that broke me didn't have to keep breaking others. I could rebuild something stronger, not by fighting their way, but by creating my own. 6 months later, I started a side project, a digital platform for women in corporate spaces to share their experiences anonymously. Stories of sexism, harassment, unfair treatment, and the quiet, daily indignities that never make headlines but destroy confidence just the same. At first, only a few stories came in, then hundreds, then thousands. Some were from women who sounded just like me. Some were from men who had seen the hypocrisy and couldn't unsee it anymore. One message stopped me cold. It was from someone at my old company. They said Ethan had been fired. Apparently he'd crossed the wrong person, a board member's daughter. The same behavior I was punished for calling out was suddenly inexcusable when it happened to someone who mattered more. I didn't feel joy. Not exactly. It was something colder. Closure, maybe? Or the absence of fear. A year later, the platform grew into a full advocacy group. We began offering workshops to companies, not just about harassment policies, but about accountability, transparency, and equality that actually means something. The first time I stood on a stage to speak publicly about my story, my voice didn't shake. The lights were hot and the room was full, but I felt grounded. I told them how I lost everything because I spoke up, how I was branded as unstable, emotional, difficult, and how every label they gave me became the foundation I used to build something real. Because here's what I learned. They can silence one woman. They can discredit her, isolate her, make her question her own memory, but they can't silence thousands. Sometimes I still think about the version of me who sat in that HR office, trying not to cry as they hand me a letter full of polite betrayal. I wish I could tell her that she wasn't weak, that losing that battle didn't make her a failure. It made her the blueprint for change. The double standard that once shattered my life became the reason I found my voice. Now, when I walk into boardrooms and see women sitting at tables they were once excluded from, I know something has shifted. Not enough, but something. The fight isn't over. It never really is. But this time, I'm not fighting alone. 5 years had passed since my life had fallen apart. 5 years since the company that broke me became the reason I rebuilt everything. The advocacy group I founded had grown into a movement. We had offices in 3 countries, a podcast, a legal network, and more women stepping forward every day to share what once silenced them. From the outside, it looked like success. But inside, I was haunted by a question I couldn't shake. What happens when the system you built to fight injustice starts to resemble the one you escaped? It started with a message from an old contact, a senior executive at a global tech firm known for its shiny diversity campaigns and photo-ready philanthropy. She wanted to meet off the record. When we met, she looked exhausted, the kind of tired that comes from carrying too many secrets. She told me the company had been covering up a massive pay discrimination scheme, hiding behind stage promotions and inflated job titles. She handed me a folder full of evidence, internal emails, contracts, salary records. If it was real, it was explosive. It could destroy one of the biggest corporations in the world. But it would also destroy the women working there, those whose names were on those documents. The whistleblower told me the company would retaliate, and hard. I promised her I'd handle it carefully. I didn't realize then what that promise would cost. When I brought the evidence to my board, the response wasn't what I expected. They saw opportunity. A major expose would mean attention, funding, validation. But all I could think about were the women who'd lose their jobs, the ones who'd have their careers ruined before anyone called them brave. I asked if we could delay it, verify everything, protect the sources. They said hesitation looked weak. That word again, weak. The same word they used when I spoke up years ago. For the first time, I saw the reflection of what we'd become. An organization so focused on being loud that it had forgotten to be careful. I stayed up that night rereading the files, feeling the weight of a decision that could change everything. If I published the report, it would make headlines, but it might destroy lives. If I buried it, I'd be protecting the guilty. I thought of the woman I used to be, the one they called difficult, emotional, unstable. She wouldn't have hesitated. She would have chosen the truth, no matter how much it cost, so I made my choice. 2 weeks later, we released the story, but not through my organization. I leaked it anonymously to an independent journalist with no ties to us, no agenda, no bias, someone who would protect the sources and let the truth speak for itself. When the article went live, the fallout was immediate. The corporation's stock plummeted, executives resigned, lawsuits were filed, and somehow the journalist traced the leak back to me. By morning, my name was everywhere. The board was furious. They said I'd betrayed the organization, that I'd jeopardized our credibility. I reminded them why we existed in the first place. They said I'd gone rogue. They called an emergency vote. By sunset, I was removed from my own creation. I thought I'd feel broken again. I didn't. I felt clean. Because for the first time in years, I didn't have to choose between being right and being strategic. I just had to be honest. A month later, I started over again, smaller this time. No boardrooms, no sponsors, no cameras, just a handful of women and a shared purpose: to protect, not perform. We called it the Mirror Project because sometimes to see the truth, you have to strip everything away until what's left staring back at you is real. Sometimes I still get emails from reporters asking if I regret leaking those documents. I don't. Because every time one woman finds the courage to tell her story, the double standard loses another layer of power. And that's what they never understood. The system doesn't fall when you shout at it. It falls when you refuse to play by its rules. So yes, I lost everything twice, but this time I lost it on my own terms. And that made all the difference.